All right, everyone. So I want to talk to you guys about something that really just disgusts me, and that is how they are trying to push Sodom in all forms of entertainment, in all forms of artistic expression. They try to push Sodom. They try to push Sodom in movies, in video games, in books, and they will ruin entire cinematic universes by spreading this blight of Sodom. And they will try to make things that are holy look like they're from Sodom. They will attack the holy. They will attack the sacred. They will say things like, well, maybe Jesus Christ was a homosexual. And it's just so disgusting and disturbing when they do that sort of thing. I hate it when they do that sort of thing. They will attack the holy. They will attack the sacred. They will attack the divine. They will say things like, well, maybe Moses was homosexual, maybe David was homosexual, maybe Jonathan was homosexual, maybe St. Paul was homosexual, and it's just so evil. And they try to ruin everything beautiful. They try to stain all things that are beautiful with this blight of Sodom, and they do it incessantly, and I absolutely hate it. I hate it so much, and they will always push this evil. And it just looks grotesque. And it looks ugly. They love ugliness, these people. They love things that are gross and things that are unnatural. And we all know why Sodom is evil. We all know why it's disgusting. We all know why it's disturbing. Because we innately understand that Sodom is unnatural. We innately understand that all things Sodom are against the natural order designed by God. But they try to make everything ugly. They try to ruin films, video games, books. You can't watch a new movie without the risk of Sodom being pushed in the film. You cannot play a new video game without the risk of seeing Sodom being pushed in the game. You can't read a new book without seeing Sodom being pushed in the book. Even history books, books about historical topics such as the Holocaust, will even express this sodomite agenda, and it's just disturbing, annoying, grotesque, and it's just repulsive, and I just can't stand it. And I have to ask the question, I have to lament, why do they have to keep pushing Sodom in everything? Why can't they leave art alone? They can't help themselves because they have this agenda. And if you read ancient books about history, you don't see this sort of agenda being pushed. So, for example, if you read Josephus' history on the Roman-Judean War, Josephus talks about the war, he talks about the massacres, he talks about the battles, he talks about the cities, he talks about the cities that were devastated, he talks about people dying from starvation, he talks about all of the horrors that you will see in war. And Josephus will also condemn and expose Sodom. He talks about the Jewish rebels who fought against the Romans. He talks about how these Jewish rebels, when they took over Jerusalem, they began to celebrate in this horrific orgy of Sodom, and how the men began to put on dresses, and how they began to walk like women, and how they began to murder other people, how they were vicious, how they were corrupt, how they were degenerate, how they were utterly disgusting. And Josephus doesn't say, wow, this was great. It was an amazing pride rally in the midst of ancient Jerusalem. No. Josephus describes it as disgusting, as repulsive, as evil, as sinister, as insidious. He describes these people as being at war with the holy, at war against the divine. He describes these people as they should be described, as evil. And if we are to add a modern label to what Josephus is describing in this book, we will say that these Jews who were fighting the Romans in ancient Jerusalem, they were woke. This was ancient wokeism being described by Josephus. But Josephus does not praise it. He condemns it. He condemns it. But today, when you read these modern-day books, these modern-day history books, you will see Sodom being pushed. And I have to ask the question, why? Why must you put this blight, this stain of Sodom in your book? And what spurred me to do this video was reading this book. I am almost done with this book. I am about 50 or so pages away from completing it. So why am I doing this review of this book before finishing it? Because I saw something in the book today that just reminded me of this evil trend of pushing Sodom in all forms of artistic expression. So the book talks about the history of the Holocaust. The book gets into some aspects of the history of the Holocaust. It talks about the life of Hans Frank, who was the leading governor of German-occupied Poland. And so as I was reading about Hans Frank, I'm thinking, okay, I'm learning something. And I have learned a lot from reading this book. Do not get me wrong. I am not saying the book is not educational. I'm not saying that the book is not informative. But I'm saying that this book has a blight on it. It has a stain that is gross. So what am I talking about here? The book gets into the life of Hans Frank, who was the leading governor of German-occupied Poland. Okay, fair enough. That's fine. And as I'm reading about Hans Frank, I'm thinking, okay, I'm learning something here. The book gets into the life of Hirsch Lauterpacht, who was the one who influenced the prosecutors of the Nazis to use the term war crime when judging the Nazis. Okay, so I'm learning something. I'm learning something new. I'm learning about the life of this guy named Lauterpacht and how he influenced the Nuremberg trials. Very good. The book gets into the life of Raphael Lemkin, the one who coined the term genocide. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm learning something new. I'm learning about the guy who coined the term genocide, which is a word that we use when describing the Holocaust. Very good. Very well. And then I'm reading the book today, and the author begins to speculate on whether or not his grandfather was homosexual, because the author talks about the life of his grandfather. His grandfather was a man named Leon, and his grandfather was alive during the Holocaust. And his grandfather escaped the Nazi reign of terror. His grandfather was married, had a family. But he begins to say, well, maybe my grandfather was homosexual. And I'm thinking, okay, why? Why are you getting into this? Why do you have to do this? Why do you have to put this blight on your book, which has been very educational until this point? And then he starts talking about Raphael Lemkin, and he says, well, perhaps Raphael Lemkin was homosexual. And he says Raphael Lemkin never got married. Okay, that's not evidence that Lemkin was homosexual, and he doesn't say that that's evidence, to be fair. And then he starts saying things like, well, Lemkin left behind a whole bunch of poems. Okay, and in 2 of these poems, he expresses affection towards men. Now, was this affection being said towards male friends? And perhaps this affection had absolutely nothing to do with homosexuality? We don't really know. We don't know emphatically. But the author begins to make this suggestion that, well, perhaps Lemkin was homosexual, and he starts making this speculation. So I wanted to look for another opinion. So I went to Google and I looked up, was Lemkin homosexual? The only person I could find on Google saying that perhaps Lemkin was homosexual was this guy. That's it. That's all I could find. So I'm thinking, why make such speculation, and why ruin this book? Why can't you just talk about how Lemkin came up with the term genocide? Why can't you just talk about how Lauterpacht influenced the Nuremberg trials? Why do you have to push this Sodom crap? Oh, because you're an acolyte of the religion of Sodom. That's it. I just want to read a book about the history of the Holocaust without hearing speculation about whether or not someone was a homosexual, whether or not some figure who was influential in how we see the Holocaust was a homosexual, whether or not some person who influenced the Nuremberg trial or some person who influenced the UN when talking about the Holocaust was homosexual, because the UN uses the term genocide, and that term came from Mr. Lemkin. But why do I have to get this speculation? Why do I have to hear about this gross stuff? It's gross. Sodom is gross. And I just don't want to see it. It's disgusting. And this is why people are disgusted by wokeism. This is why people are disgusted by woke marketing. Jaguar puts out a commercial and they show a bunch of dudes in dresses. People don't want to see it. They don't want to see it. It really is that simple. We don't like looking at ugly things. We don't. We don't like looking at ugliness. Men in dresses, that's gross. It's gross. Two men together. It's gross. If they decide to make James Bond gay, that'll be the end of Bond. It'll be the end of Bond. It'll be the end of that entire cinematic universe. And if they ever say, well, we're going to make a new Bond movie, but this time Bond's going to be gay and there's going to be no Bond girl. No Bond girl. There's just going to be a Bond guy. There's going to be a Bond guy and Bond's going to have an affair with a guy. People are not going to be running by the droves to go see such a movie. Now, there will be a lot of people going on to YouTube to make videos criticizing and bashing the movie and saying that the film is woke trash. There will be a lot of that. But there's not going to be droves of people tripping on each other's toes to go see such a film, because such a film would be just the end of that cinematic universe. My favorite video game universe is Resident Evil. I love the Resident Evil universe. I've been playing it since Resident Evil 4 came out. I've played the RE2 remake. I played the RE3 remake. I've played Resident Evil Revelations 1 and 2. I've played Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, 7, 8. I played Raccoon City. I played a lot of the Resident Evil games. And my only fear when it comes to Resident Evil is them making Resident Evil woke and gay. That is my biggest number one fear. It's actually my only fear, because I love the Resident Evil series. I love how they do the games. Hell, I even enjoy Resident Evil 6. A lot of people hated RE6 because it was too much of an action game, but I thought it was a lot of fun, and it was a really nice long game with a lot of entertainment and a lot of action, a lot of shooting zombies. It was great. But my biggest fear, my only fear, I should say, is one day playing a new Resident Evil game and a Resident Evil character is presented as a member of Sodom. And that's my fear, that they're going to say, oh, look, they're going to say something like, oh, look, Leon Kennedy is gay. And if they do that, they will just ruin the whole thing, and I'll just stop playing Resident Evil. I'll just stop. I mean, they could make a game where Leon Kennedy is in a relationship with Ashley Graham, completely legitimate. I mean, Ashley Graham, she was fine. She was the finest chick in all of Resident Evil. Claire Redfield was also pretty fine. But Ashley Graham, I think, really is the top woman in the Resident Evil world. Ada Wong, pretty good. People don't want to see two dudes. People want to see Ashley Graham. They want to see a beautiful woman. They don't want to see a Bond man. They want to see a Bond girl. They want to see the woman from GoldenEye, or the two women from GoldenEye. There are two women in GoldenEye, one of whom is a psychopath, but she is a beautiful psychopath, to be completely fair. People want to see the Asian chick from Tomorrow Never Dies. People want to see Halle Berry from Die Another Day. They don't want to see a Bond guy. They don't want to see two men. They don't want to see cross-dressers. They don't want to see furries. Why? Because it's disgusting. That's why. It's just gross, and it's repulsive, and it's ugly. And this is why I despise these people, because they actively go out of their way to ruin art. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.